Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City Council special meeting, November 13th. I'm going to call it to order. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to conduct a public hearing on the High Street Collection Development Agreement. As a reminder, we continue to have a remote aspect to our meetings, and both staff and members of the public may be participating in tonight's meeting remotely via WebEx. This meeting will be followed by a council committee of the whole. So there are two meetings this evening. If you've come for the committee of the whole, it's going to take a little bit till we get through our first session. So thank you for coming. The first item is the public hearing. This is AB 8704, High Street Collection Development Agreement, and the council tonight will be holding the public hearing. I'd like to invite City Attorney Rachel Turpin up to the microphone to make a presentation. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members, mayor, staff, members of the public. I'm Rachel Bender-Turpin, and I'm the city attorney, and I'm here tonight to give you a brief overview of the High Street Collection Development Agreement. So the purpose of tonight's public hearing is to discuss and provide input into the High Street Collection Development Agreement. The purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview of what that development agreement entails. Next slide. The action requested of the council is not action for this evening, but we ask that the council forward a proposed ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute the High Street Development Agreement for consideration at the next regular meeting of the City Council on November 20th. A little background on the proposal here this evening. IHIF Commercial, doing business as Shelter Holdings, which I'm going to refer to them this evening as because it's much easier for me to say, owns a parcel that's approximately 21.46 acres in the Issaquah Highlands. The property is currently vested to the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement. This was established by the Court of Appeals after extensive litigation between the parties. That ruling came down in August of 2022. So that's currently where the property's existing entitlements come from and what those are. However, last year, the parties entered into negotiations on a new development agreement for the property, which, if approved, would supersede the applicant's vesting under the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement. On October 4th of this year, Shelter formally applied for the High Street Collection Development Agreement, which is why we're here this evening. Next slide. This is a visual depiction of the property. As you can see, it runs from kind of the corner of Highlands and 9th all the way over to Discovery. Thank you. Too small for me to read. And we'll bring this back up later so everyone can see, but I think this is good for now. Now a little bit more about why we're really here, what this agreement entails. This agreement proposes a development project that would be a phased mixed-use development, including commercial, retail, and residential uses. It would be developed over a 15-year term, which is the term of the development agreement that's proposed. The project would include up to 325,000 square feet of commercial and retail uses. Those are commercial and retail uses combined, and up to 1,250 residential units that would be primarily located in mixed-use buildings. The project would provide additional public benefits, such as community recreation elements that were not contemplated for that property under the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement. It would also provide an opportunity for more affordable housing in the area, age-restricted or assisted living housing as well. Next, thank you. A little about the community amenities and recreation, because I know that that's a very big deal for our community. Under the agreement, there would be a requirement for 200 square feet of what we call community amenity space per residential unit. Community amenity space may include recreation areas, landscaping, festival streets, trails, plazas, and other pedestrian gathering places for people to connect with one another. 20% of this requirement could be met with indoor amenities that would allow for year-round use, such as health and fitness facilities, club and game rooms, or indoor sport facilities for folks to use. There would also be 2 outdoor community recreation elements that would total 40,000 square feet. They may either be combined or they may be in the form of a 25,000 square feet parcel and then another 15,000 square feet. These areas would be designated and designed for active outdoor recreation amenities, for instance, potential water features, sports courts, climbing walls, adaptive playground equipment, or outdoor fitness equipment. There'd also be a covered portion to allow for all-weather use, which is important to us here in the rainy Pacific Northwest. And then the applicant shelter would also have to construct a trail connecting High Street Linear Park to Discovery Drive, which is currently an existing, and I won't say deficiency, but it's a hole that we'd like to fill for the community. Next slide. Development regulations for the property would be as set forth in the development agreement. They include standards for land use, parking, roads, landscaping, the community amenity space that we talked about, trails, signs, lighting. It also includes procedures for the site development process and standards and scale for the buildings to use, as well as land use standards, meaning what kinds of uses there would be allowed in that area. There are provisions for streamlined permit processing, with the applicant paying review costs as specified in the agreement. And there would also be a process for minor modifications to development standards that would allow the parties to benefit from new technologies or information that come into being during the term of the agreement, or to address unanticipated issues, because as we've tried to address everything, I'm sure little things will come up from time to time. Slide. The design review process for the project would have to comply with the Issaquah Highlands Community Association's High Street Properties Architectural Standards, and design review would actually be completed by the Issaquah Highlands Architectural Review Committee, which will ensure that the project looks and feels like the rest of the community up there. State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, review was conducted for this project, and a determination of non-significance and an adoption of existing environmental documents was issued on October 29th of this year. That agreement, or that document, adopts the Grand Ridge View draft and final EIS for the project. The options that are before the council, not this evening once again, but in general, would be to adopt an ordinance approving the agreement or to not adopt an ordinance approving the agreement. And my recommendation and the recommendation of the administration is that the council pass an ordinance approving and authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement. Next steps, at the meeting on November 20th, an ordinance approving the agreement will be up for consideration by the City Council. And I believe that's it. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions, although it may be helpful if we do a brief presentation from the applicant first, and then perhaps we can field
I think that's
questions
best.
together.
Thanks, Rachel.
Okay. All right. And Tisha, if you mind putting up that one slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm Gary Young with Shelter Holdings, Mayor Pauley, council members, community at large, and guests and staff. We've been waiting a long time and really appreciate the collaborative and the tremendous amount of work that both the council has undertaken and staff to bring us forward to the day. And we're looking forward to doing the best job we can and moving forward. Shelter Holdings is a family business. My partner, Jeff Gow, and myself are the founders, and we live here in the area. Jeff's 3 daughters went to the Children's Garden School and graduated from Issaquah High School many years ago, and so we're very connected and part of this community. We've been actively building in the community for well over 30 years in all various shapes and forms, and also throughout the region. We typically hold and operate and own our projects. We're also very active with our local community organizations. And just briefly to touch on a long-term, probably our oldest relationship, going to Life Enrichment Options, where we built the first home, and our sub-trades and everyone pulled together, and we built that first home and dedicated it to Leo to be their first asset as that important group moved forward. And our whole entire staff and office came and landscaped that first home right across from Ava Frissinger's house, the mayor of Issaquah at that time, right across the street. Turned out really incredible. We've been involved with every home since, all the way through the process, supporting, providing financial support every year. And Leo is well established on its own feet, carrying forward on its own. And obviously we have a beautiful Leo home here in Issaquah Highlands, which is great to be a part of that. Carrying forward, Issaquah School Foundation, we've been involved with for years. We have a small orchard of golden apples in awards from the Issaquah School Foundation in my office. And we participated in many programs through that tenure and continue to do so, one of which helping teachers in the Issaquah district, trying to relocate younger teachers, lower income, in some of the apartments that we've used, and different steps like that. But we really appreciate the work that the foundation does. Teen Garage, Kaylee, and all the work that happens with that is an amazing property project. The city's very involved with that and is essential, I think, to being proximate to the school. Carrying forward then, Issaquah History Museum, I was serving as chair on the steering committee a number of years before COVID as a group working to try to bring that to another level. And now, fortunately, I think it's been reorganized now, and Paul Winterstein is involved. There's going to be an open house this Thursday. That's pretty exciting to see that move ahead and be able to hold a lot of the history of this area going so far back. Finally, Eastside Baby Corner, now Kid Vantage. We've been involved for years with them, helping them in different areas to get their computers and things set up for distribution. It's an amazing organization. And Rob Hunt is my neighbor and close friend, and with Village Theater, we were very active with the children's, the kids programs in the summer, essentially, where they were basically helping 3,000 kids between Everett and Issaquah, because they're located in both areas, going through that. So moving ahead, a dark cloud maybe is the word COVID. And COVID has maybe completely altered all of our lives in so many respects, and probably brought a lot more work to the council than they ever dreamed they'd ever want to have. It also has very dramatically impacted the office and the workplace market. And I touch on this point briefly just to say that many local companies, we have built our own building, we have tenants, we lease, and we're very active in that area, but not as much now. But essentially, many of our companies, businesses are downsizing. Companies like Microsoft, Amazon are proceeding with changing plans. Entire existing buildings are looking to maybe having leases change, emptying them, and also new projects being canceled. We've had a complete change in the fabric of the office market in the region, basically Seattle, Bellevue being most concerned about that, and it also affects Issaquah. WeWork's recent announcement on bankruptcy is another conversation that keys into this aspect in this conversation. So as we move forward, we're going to have an evolution or a new kind of hybrid workforce that we're all anxious to understand and see how that plays out and how does that work in all our communities. And I think that'll be a combination from what we can see of people working at home, people are going to work remote, and people are still going to be coming into the office, but might not be 5 days a week, maybe 2, maybe 3. So in thinking about these things, we're also paying attention to the medical model. I obviously do because I'm 75 coming up this year. So as we look, our hospitals, our clinics are coming into new ways to deal with providing their services, and especially that's important in Issaquah Highlands. So we're seeing an entirely new approach to these. Our proposal, as we're looking that we've worked through, is providing flexibility to address the changing needs that Issaquah Highlands is experiencing and our community at large. We are enhancing many of the services that the community presently enjoys in our plan. We're also adding additional park and recreation opportunities that Rachel has touched on. We're providing an opportunity for some of the founding and longtime residents like Jeff Walker, 25 years I think now, to be able to stay in the neighborhood maybe and have a choice for downsizing. I won't bring up the word senior, Jeff, but anyway, that happens. We all get old, but there's an opportunity and a need for different varieties of choice of residency, and for people that understand, have lived in this community, know how important it is, and it's not, most do not want to leave, but they also don't want to have a big house. So that's another point that we're trying to address in our planning. We're providing the badly needed workforce housing and more affordable housing for the neighborhoods in general. I'll summarize by saying we just very much appreciate the opportunity to be thoughtful, long-term participants in this thriving Issaquah Highlands community to make it even more enjoyable to call it home. Over the last 8 years that we have owned this property, we have shared ideas with the community at various events that we held and reach out sessions, engaged consultants, met with many of you individually to learn about your community's needs and to develop ideas for projects that would make Issaquah Highlands an even better place to live. We're excited that the development agreement establishes a framework that will make it possible to build a project that responds to many of these very diverse needs that we have heard requested over the years. And we'd like now to turn this conversation over to Tia, who's worked on this for over 8 years now and is my associate, and she'll cover a few more details. And I just want to thank you all very much for your time. Thanks.
Good evening, Council. Thanks for having us here tonight. I'll try to be brief here, but maybe hit on some of the details that are in the development agreement that might be of interest to people. First of all, we are really excited to be able to be in a position to turn the page and work together with the city on a project that we think will really be beneficial to the community, the city, and everyone involved. This development agreement would establish a framework that would allow us to finally utilize the vacant property that would complete the Issaquah Highlands in a way that would be beneficial to the community and would help resolve many years of dispute. As Gary mentioned, the development agreement would also allow us to respond to many of the needs and desires that we've heard from the community over the years. So I'll touch on a few of those. It would allow mixed-use development that's responsive to market, which has been an issue in the past, is having market support for the types of development that are desired. The majority of the residential buildings would be mixed use with residential units over ground floor commercial, which means more shops, more restaurants, more services. We know that the community would love to see a restaurant that serves breakfast in the Issaquah Highlands. That was something we heard over and over again. We didn't forget, and this would allow us to go look for a tenant that could fill that need. It would allow for at least one space that could accommodate an entertainment tenant, which again was something else that we heard a desire for and a need for in Issaquah Highlands. For mixed-use buildings, the majority of the parking would be anticipated to be underground, which really allows us to focus on making a walkable project that's really focused on the pedestrian experience and making it easy for people to get from one use to the other. Shelter's property has always had a certain amount of traffic anticipated and already mitigated for, associated with full build out under the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement, which Shelter is vested to. For the new development agreement, Shelter's traffic engineer looked at how changing that mix of uses on our property from primarily commercial retail to a mixed use development how that impacts traffic. The traffic analysis was thorough. It used updated traffic counts, and it found that under the new development agreement, it would generate fewer total trips and no significantly different overall impacts than what was allowed and planned for under the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement. In terms of considering how Shelters project fits into the traffic of the broader Issaquah community, the citywide traffic modeling maintained by the city assumes full build-out of both the Lakeside property and Shelters property. In addition, the Lakeside development was factored into the growth rate that we used in the Shelter Holdings traffic analysis. This would end up being a transit-oriented development just by proximity to the Issaquah Highlands Park and Ride. It would also provide some missing connections for trails and roads. I think you heard about the connection of the High Street Linear Park to Discovery Drive. And it would also include the extension of Federal between 9th and 8th and the extension of 8th between Deer Lane and Discovery. So overall, it's just going to provide stronger pedestrian and bike connections from Swedish, West Ridge, West Highlands Park neighborhoods to both the new and the existing commercial and retail areas. It also provides for community gathering spaces with possibilities for festival streets and plazas that could be used for community events. It provides 40,000 square feet of community rec space, and at the point we get to planning that, there will be a process for input from the public and the city on the design of that space. And ultimately, that space could either be owned by IHCA, or if they don't want to take title to it, then it would be owned by the city. Also opportunities for affordable housing and assisted living or senior housing, which again were things that we've heard over and over there's a need for. And it does not include self-storage as an allowed use, which I know was also some feedback that we've gotten over the years. This development agreement will result in a development that's consistent with the existing community. The development regulations that are in this agreement are based on the regulations that were in the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement, which is what governed all the rest of the development in Issaquah Highlands. But it does have some updates for things like parking, stormwater management, community spaces, all of which will be to the benefit of the community. There are no changes to the maximum height on the property, and the density and scale are all consistent with what has always been planned for that property under the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement. The development agreement does not change anything with respect to IHCA. The property will still be part of the IHCA. Will continue to pay dues, and as you heard, the design review will be conducted by IHCA ARC. So we firmly believe that this development agreement is a good outcome for the city, the community, and Shelter Holdings, and we thank you for considering it.
We have heard both from Rachel and the applicant, and for any of the information presented, does council have any questions? What? Go ahead.
Just a quick question. We received quite a few comments and questions from the community. Can you just talk about how we went about responding to that, and if they got an email response with it, or is this their response here?
The responses are there in the packet for all comments that we received, at least up until about a week ago. We did get a few that came in after that time, which we have not yet had a chance to respond to, but we will be writing responses to those as well.
And thank you, Deputy Council President. Any other questions? I'm going to keep Rachel up there for a second. Rachel, there was one comment made in the application, and you are probably the most familiar person of all of us with the agreement. The recreational amenity either could be managed by IHCA or the city.
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
thanks. Okay, last chance. Not seeing anyone. I will open the public hearing at 6:54. And this is the opportunity for members of the public to address the council in person or virtually. A reminder that comments made under this public hearing are to relate to the proposed development agreement. This is not the time for general comments. We will have a time for general comments when the City Council opens up the Committee of the Whole meeting. Those who have signed up in advance will be called on first, and if you're joining us virtually and would like to make comments, please raise your virtual hand or send our host a message in the chat. If you are on the phone, please press *3, and if you've joined by computer or smartphone, there is a hand icon. If you are in the room and did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing this portion of the meeting, so do not worry. And for those making comments, please remember to address the whole council and not individuals on the council. And while this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. So when you are recognized, please come up if you're in the room to the podium in the center and turn the microphone on. And if you are virtual with us, there will be a way for you to unmute your microphone. State your name, address, relationship to the city, and speak clearly and pause frequently. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. If someone is attending virtually and does not respond after their name or phone number, or if the connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will still need to proceed, and you are encouraged to rejoin the meeting if you are able. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. Public comments, written and verbal, are an important aspect of the public process, and the city takes these comments seriously. So we thank everyone who takes the time to address us this evening. City Clerk, can you please identify the first person who has signed up to speak this evening?
Yes, so we have 4 individuals who've signed up to speak in the room here and at least 1 virtual attendee. We have about a dozen folks with us online tonight. The first person signed up is Terrence Danish.
Welcome, Terrence. You do.
There we go. Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council members. Thank you for taking the time to hear from us, the public, and interested parties. My name is Terry Danish. I'm outside counsel for Regency Centers, the developer of the Grand Ridge Plaza. You know that they have a strong interest in what's happening here today. And I want you to understand that we respect the fact that you have gone through a long process with Shelter Holdings. We know what that's like. We've gone through that process ourselves many years ago. And we're mainly here to talk about those promises and discussions that took place a long time ago, at least a decade ago, to my client, the Regency Center folks, and how that interacts with the proposed development agreement. We know that the city is confined to the decision that was handed down back in August of 2022 by the Court of Appeals. But the proposed development agreement, at least in our opinion, goes beyond that constraint. And we are concerned that some of the proposed design standards are not consistent with those of the original Issaquah Highlands development agreement. That's not something that you heard from the developer Shelter Holdings here, but I'm going to just touch on that briefly, and we can obviously go into more detail at some other time if you invite us to or otherwise. Among other things, the proposed development agreement is devoid of the density and floor area ratio restrictions that are applicable in the Highlands development agreement. In fact, ultimately, as a result of that, it creates that imbalance that and what I might otherwise characterize as unfairness as between what my client, Regency, has done at the Grand Ridge Plaza and was constrained by in the course of the many years of development of that, and what is now being proposed to allow Shelter Holdings to proceed with. Also, the development agreement is devoid of some similar height, bulk, and scale type standards that are applicable to the original development agreement and the property that in this case don't apply, allowing, for example, 85-foot heights across the balance of the 20-acre parcel without limit. That's not something that was originally contemplated under the original development agreement, and not something that my client was able to benefit from. The practical effect of that kind of latitude is that Shelter is going to be able to develop this property much more intensively than their prior neighbors, their existing neighbors that are already there. Regency, as you know, is the major stakeholder in that property up on the Highlands. I know this quite well because I lived in the Snoqualmie Ridge neighborhood for 15 years. And before the Safeway came there, I was always at the Issaquah Safeway, the Issaquah Highlands Safeway, and patronizing the businesses at the Grand Ridge Plaza. It's obviously you know that it's a vibrant community. It's really the envy of a lot of the East Side King County communities. But it feels like Shelter is kind of stepping in to reap the rewards of the investment that Regency has made over the last decade in that property. So with that said, really, and you will hear from other representatives of Regency and from Safeway tonight briefly, but what we're really appealing to the council for is an element of partnership here. Regency would like to partner with the city and with Shelter in the process going forward. We would like to participate and be allowed to participate and ask for a role in participating in either the Architectural Review Committee or some mechanism that allows for some of that balancing to occur. It may not be required as a matter of law, but as a matter of equity, we feel quite strongly, obviously, that the investment Regency has made is worth the city's and Shelter's respect and investment in their own time to create that partnership. So, you know, our hope is obviously that ultimately what occurs here is as successful, as attractive, and as welcoming to all as has been the Grand Ridge Plaza. But we have some concerns, as I said, that the development standards that allow the Shelter Holdings project to go forward under the proposed development agreement create an imbalance, an unfairness. So with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence. That is our 5-minute buzzer. City Clerk, who is next?
Jeff Parker?
Hello, good evening. Excuse me. My name is Jeff Parker. I'm the Senior Real Estate Manager for Safeway. My address is 1121 124th Avenue Northeast, Bellevue, Washington, 98005. The only familiar face I see up here, I believe, is Councilmember Martz, who was here when I went through my presentations many years ago. We opened our store. I was the project manager for Safeway for that grand opening back in October of 2013. I started my interaction up in the Highlands with Port Blakely probably in 2011, maybe 2010, and developed a relationship with them, and then eventually with Regency Centers. We went through a design review with the Issaquah Highlands and our entitlements through the city. Back then, Safeway made a significant investment in the Highlands and Grand Ridge Plaza, along with Regency. We did a ground lease there, so we built the building ourselves. We pay rent as a ground lessee up there, but we invested millions of dollars in the Highlands really under the understanding of the development agreement as it was, and then in my interactions personally with staff, city staff, that the development agreement was going to be the rules that everybody was going to play by, not only then but in the future. And I understand you know what has taken place you know subsequently, but the development agreement at that time said that the land on the west side of 9th was going to be either office or was going to be residential, and we invested in our store and our in the community with that understanding. And it was Grand Ridge Plaza was to be the only commercial shopping center that we were an anchor of for the Issaquah Highlands. What I what Safeway asks is that Shelter and their future tenants operate under a development agreement that is similar in nature to the one that we invested in and that we went through with the city and staff, so that what they are developing and their tenants are of a similar nature to what we invested in and what Regency has invested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. City Clerk, who's next up to speak?
Craig Ramey.
Good evening. My name is Craig Ramey. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I've been before, not everybody here, but this group many times over the last 12 years. It's been a while. I've gained a little bit of weight and have a lot more gray hair than last time I was in front of you, but I'm going to be very brief and let you know that we're super excited about Grand Ridge Plaza. All the hard work that went into it with the mayor at the time, the city council, UVDC, and Jeff Walker. I know he's here today. He put a ton of effort into what we did. The association and Sarah and her group were super helpful. Safeway and all of our tenants, the neighborhoods. It was a lot of work, but it's worth it. When I drive through there tonight, I don't live up here, but when I come through, I'm super proud of what was accomplished by everybody. And it's really important to us as Shelter Holdings go forward that same collaborative effort, okay, and that same interaction and trying to create something special that fits in with the community, that fits in with the development and the ownership and the investment that's already taken place, that we maintain that same goal and objective. You know, I'll let the development agreement and what it used to say and what it says today, and what was said to us, 10 or 12 years ago, that doesn't do us a ton of good right now, right? What's important to us right now as we go forward is that we're respectful of the investment that's taken place, respectful of all the time and effort that has been put in, and really find a way to move forward. I mean, we love to see Shelter Holdings go forward and be super successful next door. Nothing would make us happier. But we like to make sure that it's in keeping with the rest of the project that we've developed and the rest of the community. And if we can accomplish that goal, then I think it's going to be awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig. City Clerk, before we move on to the next one, we do have some folks participating virtually, and the chat is a great place for you to indicate whether or not you have questions or comments that you would like to address. So it's not a place to ask a question, it's a place to raise your hand so you get put on the speakers list. So if you are participating virtually, if there's a comment or a question you'd like to ask, please raise your hand so that the clerk can add you to the speakers list. Thanks. And City Clerk, who is next on our list?
Kurt Utterbach.
Good evening, esteemed members of City Council, Mayor, staff. My name is Kurt Utterbach. I'm the market officer overseeing Grand Ridge Plaza in the Highlands, as well as a frequent patron of not only Grand Ridge, but also a number of businesses they call Issaquah home. As a proud stakeholder within the city, as a proud stakeholder within the community, I want to express my gratitude for the City Council's ongoing commitment to ensuring the well-being and prosperity of Issaquah. When Regency committed to developing Grand Ridge Plaza after the Great Recession of 2008, it was the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. There were many unknowns and a high degree of risk that Regency and our partners agreed to take on at the time. We were steadfast in the vision laid out by the council, committed to building a central meeting place for the community, and confident in the relationships we have established with the city of Issaquah. Fast forward 12 years later, and the vision set forth by those before us have become a thriving, vibrant destination for gathering, shopping, dining, and entertainment. Our retail lineup includes Dick's Sporting Goods, Regal Theaters, Marshalls, Home Goods, Ulta, and Safeway, to name a few. In fact, a number of these stores rank as top performers in the state of Washington, contributing significantly to the local economy. Regency has not only continued to improve on the merchandising mix of the center with the new and innovative concepts, providing a balance between local and regional retailers, as well as sought-after national tenants. We also pride ourselves in being a partner in the community. Since the beginning of the project, we have worked closely with Issaquah Highlands Community Association and Highlands Council, investing in the community year in and year out to bring events such as the Holiday Santa Cruise, if you guys remember that one, where it was a 6-week initiative of Santa driving in the neighborhood during COVID. We're here with you Wednesdays, also during COVID, providing meals for local responders, assisting the build out of the tech room for the YWCA, primary sponsor for Light Up the Lane for the past 3 years running, and most recently, Step into Art at the Staircase mural dedication that I was lucky to be involved with. Pretty cool. It takes a village, and with the support of people like Sarah Huey and Lindsay Pinkston, to name a few, Regency has been able to connect with the community in a meaningful way. Our dedication to the residents of the Highlands, Issaquah community, and our customers is who we are, not just what we do. As the council looks to finalize the development of Issaquah Highlands, I encourage you to continue to include Regency Centers as a partner in the growth of the community, protecting what was built while building on the vision for the future. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Kurt. Well, before we go to online, I'd just like to check and see if anybody else in the room would like to address council this evening. Not seeing a lot. Oh, Jeff Walker, what up?
Good evening, everyone. I don't normally have notes, but I'm getting a little older myself. So, my name is Jeff Walker. I've lived here in the Issaquah Highlands for 25 years. I've had 6 family homes up there. My kids were 6, 4, and 1 when we moved in. They're now all graduated and married, and one even gave me a grandchild recently. I've seen all the growth in Issaquah Highlands. I even participated in it, being on the UVDC for 19 and a half years. I can't tell you how much time and money I've spent at Regency Centers over the years, and I appreciate what you guys have built and what goes on every day over there. So it's all a good thing, and we've seen businesses come and go. The good ones stay, the ones that don't do so well move on, and that's the natural flow of business, and we look forward to that continuing. I was pretty much married to the development agreement with the 3 housing entitlements. I've kind of gotten over that. I know things are different. I want to see things move, and I'm very happy that Shelter Holdings, the city, and the community can move forward with something and hopefully benefits everybody. I believe the demand is there for more services, retail, and as we've seen, as more have emerged over the years, the patronage has followed, sometimes led. So I do think there's an opportunity. There's a rising tide lifts all boats. We all know that. Have I been cut off? No, there we go. So there are a few holes, and I've had conversations with folks at Shelter and many community members about some of these things, and I know you know a lot of this, but I'm going to put it here in front of you guys as well. I do think we absolutely should take advantage of the space and the geography and topography that we have a rooftop bar, restaurant, somehow a public place for people to go and enjoy the beautiful scenery that we have here. We don't have that today, and it's a huge miss in my opinion. Outdoor spaces with and without weather protection. Cities like Paris and London and many others that we know do a great job of having outdoor spaces that we just don't take advantage of here because we think our weather is not good enough. There are ways to manage that, and I think everybody here loves the outdoors, and we should take advantage of that as well. Ample parking, we talked about that. I love that they're talking about doing underground parking. I would like for people to be able to park in one place and move around by foot or bike or skateboard or whatever without having to move their car around. I think we need more competitive and complementary restaurants and services. So not just one teriyaki place, but maybe some competition. I know there are category exclusivity deals that are made, and that's fine to some degree, but you know, if there's ice cream, there we should also be able to have yogurt or bubble tea. I just think that we shouldn't restrict too much because there are a lot of people with different tastes. I would love to see a splash pad for the kids. It's not a huge liability, and it's a lot of fun for everybody. I'm not a big fan of the outdoor fitness spaces. I don't think they've worked all that great. But I also hope and expect that Shelter Holdings puts as much care and quality into the public and recreational spaces as they do for the revenue-generating square footage. We've seen a couple instances in the Highlands where it's been not an afterthought, it's been part of the deal, but the effort and the energy hasn't been put into it for the final result. And I expect that Shelter will do that. And I'm really looking forward to the community surveys and the discussions that are going to take place. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll give one more chance in the room. If there's anybody else that hasn't spoken that would like to speak, please raise your hand. City Clerk, let's go to online. Do we have any hands raised?
You know, Mayor, we have 11 individuals with us. As you mentioned, they've been posing some questions, so we're directing them to our planning staff, but I don't see anyone indicating a desire to speak under the hearing.
Thanks, City Clerk. So just for the group that is here today, we had many individuals speaking at our public hearing, representing both retailers, residents, and others. Some of the comments included making sure we weren't being inconsistent with design standards, looking for strong partnerships between the city, Shelter, and those that are already there, looking for consistencies in how Grand Ridge, other retail developments were developed, really wanting to have strong collaboration and success for all. We also heard a little bit about the history of the economic conditions during the deal, during the decades when the original retail was showing up in that area, and the relationship between business partners in the community. We also heard residents' perspective on life in the Highlands, suggested amenities to enhance, promoting weather protection for outdoor spaces, believing in retail competition, and like we always hear, water features. Water features are huge. It comes up a lot. So thank you all for taking the time, and thank you for those attending online, whether you ask questions or not. It's really important.
I'm sorry, we have had one virtual attendee raise their hand.
Let's go for it.
You're open to that? Okay. All right, so Mary Ann, I've just made you a panelist, so you should have the option to unmute, and you can choose to turn your video on as well.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Mary Ann. I've been living in Issaquah for almost about 5 years now, and I just had a few questions on this. One thing that the developer was talking about was community amenities, and I just wanted a clarification on community. They talked about having a senior living facility, and I kind of just referenced immediately Providence Point, which is gated, that has some community amenity features like the tennis courts or a community garden, but that's not really accessible for anybody, for other residents of Issaquah. So I was just wondering what they're referring to as community, if it's the entirety of Issaquah or just the residents of this development. And then the second one clarification I wanted was also regarding the retail space. If they are looking at small businesses going into these retail areas, just because I see that initiative of Issaquah Loyal going around, and if they're making an effort to find local retailers to occupy those spaces. And that was all I had.
Thank you, Mary Ann, and thank you for putting your hand up. We will make sure we do not, during the public hearing, actually answer questions, but we will have our staff reach out to you on both of these, the community amenities and your example of what does it mean for senior living and whether or not it's gated, and retail space and small businesses in Issaquah Loyal. So if you have not provided your contact information, could you do that in the comment area right now so that our city clerk will be able to record it? City Clerk, did you see anyone else on, and thank you, Mary Ann. Did you see anyone else indicating a desire to speak?
I don't.
Thank you very much. City Council, do you have any objection to my closing the public hearing? Not seeing any objection. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:20 and thank all those that came to join us. This item of business will be returning to the City Council on our agenda on November 20th for action under regular business. So thank you all for coming this evening. There will be a Committee of the Whole meeting convening immediately after this meeting. We'll take a 5-minute break, but we will be using the same virtual WebEx meeting for the Committee of the Whole. And I'm assuming the council would like a 5-minute water bathroom break. So we will adjourn at 7:20 and Council President will reconvene a few minutes later. So this meeting is adjourned at 7:20.
chance. I think we are ready. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. What? Great. Welcome everyone. I, Council President Walsh, call the November 13th Special Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 7:26 p.m. As a reminder, we continue to have a remote aspect to all of our meetings, so we may have staff members, community members, or even council members participating in tonight's meeting remotely. So I think we're all here. That's good. That's good. There are multiple public comment opportunities at tonight's meeting. There is a general public comment opportunity at the beginning of the meeting, or you can make comments after the presentation and council question and answer period on tonight's agenda items. Members of the public may address council at this time in person or virtually. Those who signed up in advance to make comments will be called on first. If you're joining us virtually and would like to make comments, please raise your virtual hand. If you're on the phone, this will be *3. If you're on a computer or smartphone, you can look for the hand icon, or you can send the host a chat message. If you're in the room and did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing this portion of the meeting. And clerk, do we have anyone who has signed up to speak?
Yes.
Okay, give me a moment here. Public comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions we make. Please direct comments to the whole council and not to individuals. While this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. When recognized, unmute your microphone for a virtual attendee or step up to the lectern and press the button to light up the microphone. State your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently. Limit comments to 5 minutes. If you're attending virtually and do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. You're encouraged to rejoin the meeting if able. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. Clerk, can you identify the first person who has signed up to speak?
Yes, Cyrus Crone.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So, thank you. It's nice to see you. And to the whole, congratulations to those who had recent victories. As someone who follows current events and as a member of the Jewish community here in Issaquah, I went to the city's website just to explore and see what I saw. And there's some interesting findings that I just wanted to bring to your attention. There was a community input May of 2021 for the school resource officer, and there was a student who submitted a comment stating, as a member of the Jewish community, I know the struggle of supporting your country publicly and the fear that comes with it, fearing hate and discrimination. The school resource officer program has potential to be a great program to allow for safety for all cultures. Then I saw that the Equity Board had a meeting September 6th of 2023, recently, pre-Hamas attacks, mind you. That's important when you get to the statistics of what the Equity Board presented in that meeting. From 2018 to 2023, the IPD has kept records on hate crimes in Issaquah. On page 41 of the Equity Board's deliverable, the data clearly showed that hate crimes against Jews is the #1 documented set of hate crimes in Issaquah, ahead of the Black community. So I found that data interesting. It's on page 41 of a multi-year study that Issaquah Police Department tracked. So I have a really good Black friend, and we talk about, well, I have multiple Black friends, but I have one in particular who we have a deep dialogue about this topic on. And he said, you know, Cyrus, I'll never forget this. He said, you know, Cyrus, he goes, the benefit that you have is that you've got your camouflage, your white skin, and we as Blacks don't have that. And that just really resonated for me. Where was I? Oh, the equity board in their meeting on September 6th stated that they were going to be coming to council and the city with recommendations on how to address the environment that they've researched through the data the city has, and with Jewish hate crime being the #1 issue in the city. I hope that the equity board comes back with strong recommendations to support the Jewish community. So what can be done immediately, and what are options just in the very near future? In 2024, May 1st is Jewish Heritage Day, and maybe a proclamation on that day would be appropriate. The city has submitted proclamations for many, many other items, yet this might be an opportunity for the first time to provide some recognition of the Jewish heritage. I think that was everything. I appreciate your time, and I think that's it. Switching topics slightly, would have been awesome if the bypass had been voted in support, because now that issue's reared itself again, and would have been a lot less expensive to have had that at the time. So, okay, thank you. Have a good evening. I press a button here? Or?
Thank you, Cyrus. And do we have anyone else indicating a desire to speak?
No.
Okay. Great. So as a reminder, we really do welcome written comments and any emails. Just send them our way. You can send an email to all 7 of us by sending to citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov. Okay, so we have 2 items on our agenda tonight. We've got ID 1520, Transportation Sales Tax Public Outreach Summary, and ID 1535, Amending Financial Management Policies. For the first item, we welcome up Andrea Snyder, our Deputy City Administrator, to talk about transportation sales tax. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Hi, I'm Andrea Snyder, Deputy City Administrator. And tonight's topic is really an update on the public outreach done to date over the proposed Transportation Benefit District sales tax. So the purpose for this evening is to provide a summary on the outreach conducted to date and also confirm next steps for the sales tax item. Specifically, direction needed is, given the feedback received to date, is Council comfortable proceeding to a public hearing next week on November 20th regarding the tax? A little bit of background and reminders. The proposed sales tax would increase from 10.1% to 10.2%, so that's a 0.1% increase. We expect that increase would generate about $2.2 million annually. That revenue could only be spent on transportation, not any other type of expenditure. It would automatically sunset in 10 years without council action. And this sales tax would distribute the cost to transportation system users, not just residents. So as the city has 2 main ways of raising revenue. One is property tax, the other is sales tax. This would mean that those who are using the transportation system, who maybe don't live here but are accessing goods and services here, help pay for the system that they're using. And it wouldn't just put the cost of the transportation network on residents only or property owners only, for example. The average individual impact is estimated to be about $36 annually. And there hasn't been any evidence of impacts to businesses or consumer shopping habits for a 0.1% increase in Issaquah or in cities like Issaquah that we've experienced. As we've gone around to different Issaquah businesses and have asked them for their feedback, they also haven't provided any feedback on concerns about impacts to their businesses with this tax proposal. A summary of some of the stakeholders that we have reached out to over the past few months include just residents at large, HOAs, businesses, the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Issaquah Association. We did focus and target some of the top sales tax payers in Issaquah specifically. We've also connected with Transportation Advisory Board members, just to name a few of the stakeholders that we've reached out to. How we've reached out to them, there's been a lot of emails, some direct emails, some newsletter emails. We do have a web page that's up and running that provides a little bit more information about the tax that can also collect feedback anonymously. So we've sent out emails connecting them with that page. We've also given a number of presentations at various events, such as the Business Leadership Forum in September, the Farmers Market Council listening session. We had information available and staff present to be able to answer any questions. We also had a presence at Salmon Days. We've done a chamber board presentation. We've emailed the Transportation Advisory Board members, and we also had a council listening session last Thursday. Just an example of the types of outreach, email, and presentations and events we have conducted. And feedback received as of 11/6. So in order to prepare for tonight, we had to type this up last week. We have gotten more feedback since then. That feedback I can provide at a later date, the public hearing next week, for example. But to date, we have received general support from the business community when we've given these presentations. We haven't heard a lot of opposition from our business community at all. What we have heard from the business community is that it's really important that we consider keeping tax rates in line with peer cities. And so as part of this proposal, Issaquah would be more in line with cities like Kirkland and Auburn at that 10.2%. Bellevue is also considering raising their sales tax in support of transportation. And so we anticipate being in line or perhaps even less than Bellevue's tax rate. And that was really important to the businesses that we talked to. We have, as was included in your materials for tonight, received so far 8 resident comments that were opposed and 6 resident comments that were in favor. Those are all detailed in your packet and materials tonight. And we've also heard from a couple of our residents in those comments that they would support it if the funds were applied to Pinch Point or the Northwest Sammamish non-motorized improvements, as we have discussed in the past. So our recommendation moving forward is to proceed to the November 20th public hearing. At that public hearing, I can provide a summary of the additional feedback we've received over the past week. And then we would be able to hear more comments if the public has additional things to say about the sales tax. So timing and next steps on the tax proposal, like I said, November 20th for the public hearing. And we anticipate December 4th, we're scheduled for a city council vote to approve the tax. Should council approve the tax, then the collection of the tax would begin April 2024, and there would be a subsequent budget amendment to account for the new revenues and expenditures associated with the tax. Again, direction needed. Are we comfortable moving forward to that public hearing next week? And otherwise, I'm accepting any questions you might have.
Okay, we will start with Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Council President. Deputy Administrator Snyder, you reached out to the Chamber Board on October 20th. As my colleagues know, I'm the liaison to the board from the council. And could you go into a little more detail on what you heard after you made your presentation from the Chamber Board members?
Sure. Thank you, Council Member. We had one of the Chamber Board members come out and announce their support for the tax, saying that these investments in transportation are needed and would benefit the community. We also heard from other Chamber Board members who said that generally it's hard for businesses to say they really support a tax, but that the proposal made sense. And I think that kind of sums up the type of feedback that we heard. Again, I think we heard businesses expressed that it was important to them that the tax rate wasn't going to be significantly higher than neighboring communities. That was really important to them. Those are the general comments we received.
So having that parity with our fellow communities was important to them, and they thought that moving it up by a tenth would reach that kind of opportunity, right?
That's right. But they were discouraging of additional sales tax hikes beyond that 10.2% mark.
Okay. And no one at the chamber board meeting expressed any strong opposition to the tax?
Correct.
Okay. I really appreciate you getting up early and going to that meeting. I go to it and I'm kind of lonely most of the time. Wally's with me, but it was nice to see you at that meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Ray.
That's a hard act to follow. So this is pretty exciting. I was kind of curious on the top 10 sales tax contributors. We sent out 10 emails. Did everybody respond to our emails?
No, not everyone responded. I think I got about 4 replies that all said, thank you very much for this information. We'll let you know if we have questions.
And did they have any questions?
They did not.
Okay. And they didn't provide any yay or nay kind of comments?
No, and I got no bounce backs either. So they all seem to have reached someone, whether or not there was a reply.
Okay. And then my second question is, with the public hearing on the 20th, right? Is there anything we can do to get the word out? Not that people haven't heard already, and I know you've already tried many channels, but it would be really nice to have kind of people to know that they can come in at least for that public hearing and share their thoughts either for or against. And so if there's a way for us to do some sort of outreach to get people to come in or participate in the web meeting or send an email or something, but one last push to get some more feedback. I think I'm behind the tax and everything, but I was really concerned with the public outreach, and this, 14 kind of responses isn't really, out of a town of 40,000 people, isn't a whole lot. So anything we can do to push to get some more feedback before the public hearing would be really positive in my.
Thank you. We certainly can through our social media or through the city newsletter. When we sent the city newsletter out later last week, we received a few additional comments that I wasn't able to put in these materials tonight just due to the publication date. So I can include that in the next public hearing that we have and summarize those comments. But we do know we've had several hundred page clicks. I think that was in the materials for tonight. So people have seen it through the city newsletter and other venues. They just haven't been compelled to leave comments.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mertz.
A couple of questions around the feedback that we've received. I was looking in the packet, have we received information on rates in the surrounding communities? I didn't see it in the packet.
I don't believe it was in this packet or presentation, but it was provided in previous presentations on the TBD sales tax, and it's also on our webpage about this topic.
Okay. I asked because one of the comments from the community was one of our nearby municipalities that they claimed had a much lower tax rate than we. So I was curious about the idea that we're at equity with surrounding.
Yes. So we are at 10.1%. We are, I would say, within the mode of surrounding communities. There are some communities whose sales tax is lower because they're outside of that sound transit boundary and other regional taxation that occurs with us and a few other East Side communities. So I think you're referencing the Maple Valley comment that theirs is lower. But when we look at cities that we would generally consider more of our peers, like Kirkland, Bellevue, Redmond, et cetera, we are more in line with those cities at 10.1% currently. And then 10.2%, we would share that with Auburn and Kirkland and perhaps Bellevue in the near future.
Right. The second question was, one of the things we had heard at the listening session was, how did we come up with $36 average?
Yes, thank you for that. And I see already our CFO, Robert Hamoud, is online and anticipating that question. And so since he came up with the methodology and the estimate, I'll refer to our CFO.
Thank you, Andrea. And Councilmember Martz, just also to touch on Andrea's response on the previous question. So also the city of Redmond they just formulated a TBD this year and they're exploring this 0.1% sales tax as well. So Bellevue is, Kirkland has already, and Redmond's looking into it. And some of the cities outside of the project area of Sound Transit include Maple Valley, North Bend, and Snoqualmie. So when you're looking at those rates, they're going to be lower because they're outside of it. As far as the $36, so we estimated approximately $100 per household or $36 per individual. It's a tough number to quantify because everybody's spending habits, every household spending habits is different. So it's depending on what mix of taxable versus non-taxable items you're buying each month. But we took the average of the metropolitan expenditures from the Consumer Price Index. So Seattle, they did a 21-22 average through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the median household expenditures in the area was approximately $92,000. So use that as a starting point. And again, that information is a couple of years old, but we also pulled down that number when we took out expenditures for rent, housing, and again, non-taxable items like everyday groceries as a percentage of all food categories, because some food is taxable, some is not when you go to the grocery store. And also gas is not applicable to this tax. And so we just try to look at, again, a slice of what an average household spends per year in Issaquah and what items would be taxable, what items would not be taxable. But again, if you make a big purchase, it's going to be a little different, but in context, like a $500 purchase of a TV at Target, this would be 50 cents because again, it's 0.1% of that. So it'd be a 50-cent increase. If you bought, again, $300 worth of Amazon products, that's an extra 30 cents.
Thanks. Are automobiles covered by that? So is it at the straight up?
Yes, automobiles are subject to tax, correct.
All right. So if you bought a car at $40,000, it would be $400. $40.
That's correct.
$40. Yeah, there we go.
Sorry,
Right.
$40, yes.
$40. Thank you.
It's a little different also, just a side note on leasing. If you're leasing a vehicle, you're actually paying the tax each month on the lease. So if you have a $500 lease, then again, it's 50 cents per month.
Okay, good questions. Is that Councilmember DiMichele? Thanks.
Robert, we talked about the fact that we're spreading this tax burden across with people who don't live in Issaquah. It's people who are passing through and spending money here. Have we taken that into account in that formula? Oh, okay. That's another piece of information that people might want to know.
The formula itself, again, we're just trying to say what's the impact. And again, the other question mark to that impact is how much of our own residents in Issaquah spending inside of the community. We're assuming because Issaquah is a retail hub, they're spending a bulk of it. But again, say a resident of Issaquah is spending 1 weekend a month shopping at Bellevue Square. Of course, we're not going to get that sales tax back to Issaquah. So it's not an exact science. So again, it's about $100 per household in the city or $36 per person. That would be the same if somebody was coming outside, because again, it's looking at people's spending habits and compared to that. Now, outside, it might be a little higher if somebody's making, say, they're going to Best Buy and they're making all their electronics purchases in the city of Issaquah. They're making all their furniture purchases at Costco or something like that, or our furniture stores in the city. So they might actually be spending more than some of our residents that they're just coming into Issaquah for big ticket items, if that makes sense.
Okay, Deputy Council President Hall.
Thank you. So we've always talked about this revenue tool as a way to fund specific projects, right? So Northwest Sammamish Road non-motorized improvements and the ITS plan implementation. So when we consider the adoption of the revenue tool, none of that is tied into what we're adopting, right? Would that come at a later budget amendment?
That's correct. That would come during the budget amendment. Because this is a council-manic process, when council votes to approve or not to approve, we don't need to necessarily dedicate the revenues at that moment of time towards certain expenditures. They can only be spent on transportation, but that would come at a later time when we go through the budget process and the budget amendment process.
Okay, and just a question from me. Can you talk through timeline? So if someone still wants to give a comment, how long do they have? And then if we are looking and potentially adopt this on the November 20th, when does it go into effect and when does the revenue start to come in?
Great question. So if somebody wants to provide comments, great way to do that would be go to our webpage and look up transportation sales tax, and that will take you to the webpage where they can submit their comments anonymously. They could also, of course, write to City Council at any time, as you mentioned earlier in the meeting today, from now through December 4th, when Council is scheduled to vote on this. So they can come before the hearing next week, but they can do that anytime between now and December 4th. We are accepting comment. Should council approve of this tax, then it would start to be applied in April of 2024. So then we would start to see those collections in the subsequent months after April.
Okay, I think we have had time to ask our question and answer period. At this time, I will open public comments and see if anyone would like to make comments. No? Okay, fantastic.
I would agree with having the sales tax.
Can you start with your name and your relationship to the city?
Thank you. My name is Linda Timone. I live in the Issaquah Highlands, and I would support the sales tax. That's all.
Well, thank you. Appreciate an audience member. And I will check in with our clerk and see if we have anyone online indicating a desire to speak.
We still have a few virtual attendees, but none indicating a desire.
Well, as usual, I will say you can always send us an email. We read them all. citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov. Okay, so is there any other commentary that anyone wants to make? We'll start with Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. Thank you for the information tonight. For the public hearing on this topic, I think it would be helpful to give information about the projects that we've talked about potentially being funded by this. I know that we won't be deciding that at that exact moment, but the council will be the future decision makers on that, and I think it would be helpful to hear about those projects, and it will better inform the community about those projects if we provide more information than was provided in this presentation tonight. Also, when I was reading through the comments that have been provided so far, as would make sense, the people who are supportive are often supportive specifically because of projects that they would really like to see that would improve their quality of life and their ability to get around town. And so I think to support that part of the conversation, just providing more information about what we've discussed in the past for those projects, including the pinch point non-motorized connection to the South Lake Sammamish neighborhood, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember DiMichele?
Thank you. Yeah, the feedback is sparse, and it's somewhat disappointing. It's hard to know whether people didn't respond because they're just fine with the information, like the 168 who went on the website and looked at it, and we only had 14 that actually commented. Did the others not respond to it because, well, that's okay, you know, I don't have to respond because this looks okay to me. It's really hard to read what the public wants from those comments. And I did notice that several of the ones that were opposed were not clear that we could only spend this tax money on transportation. So again, I think that we can emphasize that fact as well. I want to plus one Councilmember Ray's comment that we need to really see if we can inform the public a lot about this hearing that's coming up. And I was thinking that maybe on the Issaquah Insider, it could be the banner topic. If we could ask Thomas Rush to make it a big deal on the Issaquah Insider that goes out, that perhaps we can get more commentary. But yeah, it is disappointing. But then on the other hand, you certainly have tried to outreach to a lot of people. And again, sometimes people don't comment because they're just okay with the proposal. So if we could do another big push, then I think that would be great. And I am comfortable going forward with the hearing on the 20th.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Hall.
Thank you. Thanks for all your work on this, Deputy City Administrator. I haven't heard anything I disagree with yet. You and I have talked about this before, but I have found that community members in particular really appreciate understanding the full arc of where this has come from, starting with the Mayor's Capital Finance Community Task Force, all the work that went into that, and the recommendations that bubbled out of that group. So I wonder if that context could be included in the public hearing presentation. If you think that the presentation for the public hearing it's too long, I understand, but I do think that that's an important piece of information about this, because we went through a very long process to get to where we are. It included stakeholders from all over the city, but the task force and the city council and the mayor and the administration all thought it was still a priority to continue to collect public input on the proposal rate. So I think it's important to make sure that we have that context in there. I'm also disappointed that we don't have more engagement, but it's always difficult. People have very busy lives, and we have to be able to balance moving forward with collecting as much input and engagement as we possibly can as well. I am happy to hear that part of that quote that you had, that, but the tax proposal makes sense. That seems like a success to me, that we did our homework. Right? If it makes sense to you, and maybe it is that people are going to the website and seeing that, okay, my leaders did their homework and they showed up and they did this right. And if that's the case, then I'm really happy about that. But I agree, I think maybe a last minute push, just in case anyone wants to comment on it, would be great. And again, it seemed like from the comments and also from our most recent listening session, there's some concern bubbling up that maybe the city isn't budgeting by priority in terms of, well, if transportation is the top priority, why aren't we dedicating capital dollars to that first? And we do. So I think it's important for us to be able to highlight, not necessarily part of this process, but this is just general feedback for the administration, ways to talk to the community about how we have this huge bucket of that we have to fund with regard to legal requirements and safety improvements and regular maintenance, which leaves us very little left over to make meaningful progress on what continues to bubble up on the community service. So finding a new way to be able to talk about that genuinely with the community seems like an important takeaway. But yeah, I'm ready to move forward with public.
Councilmember Martz.
As the second council member of the Capital Finance Community Task Force, I'd like to plus one, providing some more of context from the Capital Finance Community Task Force, because one of the things that's important for the public to understand is that the task force came up with a sort of raft of things to do, a raft of potential revenue mechanisms, some of which were short-term, some of which were medium-term, and some of which were long-term. And this is really only one element of that raft, and there's a bunch of other stuff in there. So I think it's important, I think that task force was super valuable, but I really want the public to understand when this comes up that it's part of a larger conversation and a larger set of tools that we have in front of us that we will be continuing to work on in the.
Okay. Do you have what you need on this one?
I do. Thank you very much.
Okay. Fantastic. So looking back at our agenda, we will now move on to ID 1535, amending financial management policies, presented by Rachel Bender-Turpin, our city attorney. Thanks, Rachel.
Hello again. I'm very excited to talk to you this evening about another project I've been working on for a solid year. For the record, Rachel Bender-Turpin, City Attorney, and tonight I want to talk about proposed amendments to the city's financial management policy. Ready for the next slide whenever. Thank you. The purpose of tonight's discussion is so that I can solicit feedback from this group to incorporate into the proposed amendments to the financial management policy that we've been working on for over a year at this point. The direction needed is essentially just that feedback at this point, and then we'll be back at the meeting in December with an updated version for the council to look at and take action on. Next slide, please. A little background on the financial management policy. The City Council adopts the financial management policy to provide guidance to staff, officials, and to set internal controls and oversight over the city's financial transactions. The current financial management policy was adopted in 2017, and then it was subsequently amended in January 2020, September 2021, and then March and April of 2022. As I mentioned, this has been a long process. I believe that the slide may even be incorrect. I think, thinking back on it this afternoon, I think we actually started in September or October of 2022, but we started with a multi-departmental working group that we brought together after I had been in the role for almost a year and had noticed a lot of, on my own, various issues with staff being able to clearly interpret portions of the financial management policy and coming to me for help with that, and myself seeing that there were areas where I thought maybe we could better clarify or set different or clearer standards. So I decided, well, I've seen these issues. I know finance has seen some of these issues. Let's get a whole group of representatives from every department together and just ask for kind of the laundry list of what are the issues that you have with contracting and procurement primarily, but we addressed a few other things in the financial management policy as well. Things like roadblocks to efficiency, things like consistency with other policies and codes. I get there's a lot of areas of confusion, a lot of places where we have to make interpretations because the financial management policy may speak to certain types of procurements or contracts, but not all. And so then we have to kind of guess where in the policy certain types of agreements would fall. We met multiple times as a group. I think I'll talk about that later, but we also reviewed signing thresholds for neighboring jurisdictions. So we tried to look and see, what was out there for our friends and neighbors around the area. I called in some favors with other city attorneys I knew to get me their financial management policies when they didn't have them online. And we reviewed multiple iterations of this document, which is why I do not know how I didn't catch the typos that Councilmember DeMichelle so kindly caught for me. I've read it so many times, I think they must have just blended in. And then after we'd meet as a group, we would go back and the main working group of this was myself, Natalie McNabb, our contract and procurement specialist, and then we got a lot of help from our amazing city clerk and Jeannie Justice, our administrative services manager. And we would go back and we would, I would take the input that I received in the large group meeting, and then I would write something and run it past the smaller group first to make sure that it made sense to someone other than me, and then we would meet as a larger group again for everyone to review the documents. So we did this several times over the last year. Next slide, please. And we came up with some proposed amendments based on that work. And so I'm going to go through with you what my current recommendation is for you to consider and for you to weigh in and give your own direction on. My recommendation is that we adopt standardized signing thresholds for all contract types. Currently, it's a little bit unclear. We have one, and it's difficult for staff to administer. We have an amazing cheat sheet that staff use that is really informative and explains what is needed for each particular type of contract. However, that document doesn't match up perfectly to what is in the financial management policy, and the financial management policy actually only touches a certain segment of the types of contracts that we look at. So, we have currently have different signing authorities for instance, public works contracts versus professional services contracts. And where you find those thresholds can be different in different places, and that's just causing a lot of confusion for staff. And then it also causes a lot of questions to come up as, it makes us make a lot of judgment calls. What is a professional service exactly? Is a photographer a professional service, or are we only going to look at people who have, licenses or some sort of specialized education like that? I don't love vagueness and ambiguity. It's not like generally a thing that lawyers love. And those types of questions just kept coming up, places where it was ambiguous and were places where there was room to be ambiguous. And I thought it was preferable to set just standard thresholds rather than trying to, on a one-off basis, figure out where each contract fits in. Overall, I didn't change the signing thresholds. I used essentially what we already have for professional services. I'm just suggesting we use that for all of the, and I see a quizzical look because this doesn't match what's in the financial management policy. There is a table in there, and I think that table is an error because there are other places in the document that actually have, for instance, the city administrator signing threshold up to 99,000, but I do think that the table doesn't have that. So there's a lot of weird little issues here that I think we can address through this update, such as making sure that we all do know what the actual delegated signing thresholds are for all types of contracts.
I'm going to pause for a question from Councilmember Martz.
Yeah, thank you. I thought that the threshold between mayor and city council was $200,000 or thereabouts. Is that not correct?
Let me look at the current policy here. For professional services, I do know that this is correct. For public works, Robert, do you happen to have that up by any chance?
Give me just a second.
I believe in the marked up ordinance, it shows the old chart showing 100,000 to 349,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that's on page 12 of the marked up document.
Now my screen's too small.
When you get there, can you clarify if there's a red line through the middle of it, which I'd assume meant red line to the full table, because then there's a new table below it?
There is. That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's just how it showed up on track changes. I'm looking at the cheat sheet, which was pulled from multiple sources, so I can't tell you exactly where each of these came from. But in that cheat sheet, it looks like the mayor's authority for equipment, goods, supplies, and materials, purchase general services, professional services are all from 100,000 to 349,000. I think where it may start to differ is with Public Works and architectural and engineering. And that's where the cheat sheet starts to get a little bit confusing.
Thank you.
Right. I think we can go to the next slide, Tisha. Thank you. The proposal would also clarify that a contract is budgeted if funds for the expenditure were appropriated in the biennial budget and the contract would not exceed available fund balances. The reason for this is the language as is. I got a lot of questions about it, every week pretty much, of what does it mean for it to be budgeted? Because as you all know, our budgets we don't have line item budgets that specify each particular procurement. And so that it just became a real question for folks. So even if this is not the definition we want to go with, I would like to have some sort of clarity regarding what something means to be budgeted, so that staff know, because there isn't going to be a specific line. Our budget document doesn't get as detailed where, X amount is appropriated for this particular contract. So we need to have some way for folks to know what that means. It would also establish signing authorities for various types of contracts that are not addressed. So right now, the types of contracts I get questions about almost daily are things like easements, leases, affidavits of ownership, which the council gets to see on a regular basis because they're things that we sign that just say, yes, we own this property and we're okay with our tenant applying for a permit. Things like that where we're just certifying that we own the property. These are things that settlement agreements. These are things that we do from time to time. They're just, the policy is just silent on them, and that then again leaves us in a position where we have to just guess as to which category they would fall into, or we just bring it all forward to council, which results in some crowded meetings. The proposal would also allow contract terms up to 3 years. That's based on staff feedback that it's difficult to do many of the projects that we contract for within 2 years. And so we were getting into the issue of constantly having amend contracts, which is another thing that the policy does, is it provides significantly more clarity regarding when amendments are appropriate and also when they are not appropriate. Because once again, we don't want people entering into serial contracts where they can just continue to contract past, a procurement threshold or past a signing threshold just because they're, extending a contract or adding something to the scope of work. Next slide. Like I just said, it provides clarity about when contracts can be amended. A frequent thing that I get is requests to amend contracts that have expired to extend the date. Well, once a contract's expired, there's no contract to extend. You just have to do a new contract. So the policy gets into things like that. It also has an accompanying lengthy contract manual that I drafted to give even further detail to staff on issues like this and descriptions of the types of contracts so that people have a better idea. Because sometimes, the difference between an interlocal agreement and just a general interagency agreement can be really, it can be tough for folks to understand that. The policy authorizes finance to audit all departmental contracts for compliance with the financial management policy and our procurement requirements. This is arguably something that finance could do regardless, but I thought it was important to include specific language in there so that we don't get into a territorial dispute between departments. Now, it's very clear that finance has that authority, and in fact, that job, that's their responsibility to do that, and therefore other directors won't feel like finance is meddling in their business. It's just part of the process. It also revises the city's competitive procurement requirements to match up to what's found in state law and also the already existing IMC Chapter 3.7. I believe, trying to piece together the pieces here, that I think folks may have forgotten that IMC 3.7 existed because it actually has pretty detailed procurement laws in it that are based on state law, but they are different from what we are operating under, for instance, like what we have in the cheat sheet and even some of the requirements that are set forth in the financial management policy. So I think maybe in 2017, when folks worked on the financial management policy, I just think maybe that 3.70 was not on everyone's radar. So it was on mine, and so I am also going to be proposing some amendments to that chapter as well that match up to what we're doing with the financial management policy and clarify the language in the chapter, because it really is, it's not, I can see why it was confusing to staff because it's not super well drafted the way it is. So it will essentially clarify what the existing chapter is, what it already says, just so that everyone really knows what their procurement responsibilities are. Next slide, please. Another thing that came up a lot was grants. I get a lot of requests from staff. Does this grant have to go to council? And sometimes these are very small grants, as you've probably noted. So this would authorize administrative acceptance of grants. I proposed $100,000. Of course, this is your policy. You can decide whatever you want. But I think it would be advisable to have some sort of administrative approval level in the policy so that some of these small grants can be taken through quickly. Often there are short deadlines with these, and there are probably, quite frankly, some things that the council would be better spending other time on other things. Some of these really small ones, some of them don't even have matches. Another thing that it does is it revise our surplus asset language to make it consistent with the city's surplus real property policy that we adopted last year. Well, there's a few things, or I think earlier this year, there are a few things in it that needed to be changed in the financial management policy to match. There's a couple things that I think, once again, folks just, they were just oversight errors, incorrect statutes that were cited in that section, ones that apply to the state, not municipalities, and a little bit of confusion regarding the requirements for when you need to do a public hearing for utility property. This would also delegate authority to the mayor to administratively accept donations. So right now, as per state law, the city council has to adopt or has to accept donations by ordinance. This would often, in many cities, they pass an ordinance that provides for some level of administrative acceptance of gifts. This would allow for administrative acceptance of no strings attached donations, as well as donations that are earmarked for use by certain city programs, as long as the donation is not so restrictive that it can't be used for basically any equipment items or expenses that are related to that program. This specifically came up from the Parks Department this last few months, actually, because Microsoft would like to and Microsoft employees would actually like to team up with the city and be able to make donations that Microsoft then matches to the Green Issaquah program. But currently, the way the financial management policy is written, even for small donations made on a one-off basis like that, we'd have to go to council to get approval for each of them, which is frankly, it's disincentivizing people to give. My experience has been, if people can't just give it to you and they have to go wait through it for an ordinance process, by the time they don't want to give it to you any longer. So I think especially for things where there are no strings or the strings are something that are manageable within our with our resources, then I think that it would be nice to be able to take those gifts more efficiently. Next slide, please. So we have multiple options for you this evening. You could adopt the proposed amendments that as recommended, which, our staff group has put together. But please, we're here for your feedback. You can adopt different amendments to the financial management policy. You can also just say you don't want to touch this at all and not adopt any amendments, but that will make me sad. So I hope that we can at least clean up some of these things. Next slide. My recommendation is that we forward the proposed amendments to the financial management policy for consideration and approval at the December 4th meeting. And of course, we can include any edits in that document as well. As far as next steps, in the next couple weeks, I'll be putting together the final document and an ordinance approving the new financial management policy for you to take a look at and consider on December 4th. So with that, this is the direction I am looking for, and I will open it up for questions and directives from you. Thank you.
Great. So questions first. Deputy Council President Hall.
I do have a question. Thank you. So on one of the proposal slides that talks, the grant slide, it allows the mayor to accept grants of up to $100,000, right?
Yes, correct.
Without council approval. So one side of that is definitely, it takes a little bit less off our plate, right, or more off our plate, and allows for the more timely acceptance of those dollars so we can expend those. The other side of that, right, is that we are a check to make sure we're not accepting more money than we can actually expend. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but is that something we can track? Is there any, is that an easy way to, would there be an easy way of identifying that that's a problem? If it is, if we need to make an amendment in the
I would believe so, because the grants will still have to be overseen by our finance department and our CFO, Robert Hammoud. So there will still be an analysis of that sort of thing, whether the city, does it fall within the city's strategic plan and mission and goals and policies, and is it feasible? Is this something we can spend, or is this going to be, a waste of time? I mean, it's not fair to anyone, including the other people applying for grants, if we're taking grants that we can't utilize the funds for. Robert, do you have more to add to that? You'd be more in the weeds on that than me.
Yeah, we do. Just to understand the question, we do monitor these grants, and actually we have a process internally where, I'm evaluating, my staff's evaluating those applications. So there's an approval process where I'm looking to, agree to proceed to look at those funds. And so actually the city attorney is also in that stream.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Councilmember Hunt.
I think it's a quick question. In the comparison to the other cities, it seemed to me that they did have those department specific, like Bellevue had Public Works, and actually all of the examples, I think, had these, Public Works had a different amount, and the other departments had the same designees, but a different amount. So I know you're recommending, and we previously did have that as well, right? We had some different departments with different amounts that they could authorize. So I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit more. You said you did consider what other cities were doing, and I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit more why we would go a different route than the other cities that you looked at.
I think that you're right. I noted that as well, and I thought that was interesting because in my experience working in multiple jurisdictions, I'd say most do not have separate limits. So I was surprised to see that our neighbors do for the most part. I think it's really an issue of staff confusion. We can do whatever we want. However, when we don't follow our own process, that's where we start to get issues with an auditor. And so my concern having different signing thresholds for different types of contracts is, one, we get into that issue of having to determine what type of contract each thing is. And it's very easy to say something is a public works contract generally. It's probably easy to say something is a purchase of simple supplies. It gets really tricky when we have something that's maybe a combination of service and supplies, or a combination of something other than, other than public works, but two different types of, we get a lot of, for instance, software contracts, maybe that it's part of it is the product, but part of it is the professional service. Which do we apply? And we have to sort of decide on a case-by-case basis. Then we also get the question of what is a professional services agreement? That comes up routinely because, the distinction, there is no real legal distinction between a professional services agreement and a services agreement, other than we can, of course, pull out public works services because those are separate. They are defined by the statute. There really isn't a legal definition in the RCW or the IMC that we can rely on for those other. And so then we end up getting into a position where we're kind of trying to infer what the council would have wanted on each one. And I just think it's cleaner to have one set of rules that everyone memorizes, and then we hold them accountable to those.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we get another moment for public comment, should anyone in the room or online. I'm seeing a head shake, maybe not contributing to this one, but let's see. Do we have anyone online who is indicating desire to speak?
They have all dropped off.
Oh, okay. Well, then I think we're good on that. So let's move to deliberation, feedback, all of that. Who wants to start? Councilmember Ray.
Thanks. Rachel, thanks for wading through this. This is no small creek to go through. This is like Issaquah Creek during the flood period. So there are a couple things that I think are really important just generally, and one is around streamlining operations. So I get that, and reducing ambiguity, I get that. That makes perfect sense to me, and we don't want the council to be a roadblock or a barrier to getting stuff done. So that all makes good sense to me. But I'm dealing with something that deals with sort of what are reasonable checks, and at what level do we need to have those reasonable checks? And then also having things of a certain level come to council provides public visibility, which we would not get if this is done kind of administratively. So I'm concerned about that. Most of the financial items that do come to council are on consent, so it's not like it's a major burden for us to deliberate all of these contract things. They go through very quickly. So I don't think it's a burden for this body to deal with those, and I don't think it should be a major delay while we kind of respond to that. So I'm not sure that those are big deals, but I am the two things that I really want us to focus on are there's a certain amount of diligence that goes into putting something in the packet, and how are we going to ensure that we still go through that same diligence and that people are have the same level of seriousness if we reduce the threshold for what comes to council. So that's got to be built into that. And so I guess, if I really listen to myself for just a second, and I boil this down to two things, it's how do we provide visibility and how do we ensure diligence? And because what we're doing in many of these things is upping the threshold, at which point something could be dealt with administratively. So I like the goals. I appreciate what's been done, but I don't know that I feel 100% comfortable adjusting thresholds unless I saw how we were going to have public visibility and better diligence. That's all I got.
That brings up a question for me. Do we have a sense what percentage of our financial decisions that this policy would apply to fall into the category of public works versus everything else. I'm trying to get at the concept of, hey, if we had two different sets and of, metrics that we were looking at previously, and we're choosing the larger amount for everything now, how does that apply to what percentage of our decisions?
What I've seen is that this would mostly affect non-public works contracts. The public works contracts, at least for the large capital projects, are all going to be well over anyone's signing authority. This might affect some of the smaller contracts that you're seeing where folks pulled from the small works roster, those, little things like that. I mean, last week, several that came across my desk were like an $8,000 light pole replacement. Little things like that would be, our public works, but I think the vast majority of these are other types of contracts. But Robert, I see turned his camera on. Do you have more that you can add to that?
I think that the best way to answer this, and Council President Walsh, this is something that we were really evaluating internally, and we can get back to you on the actual statistics. I mean, it changes obviously every year depending on our volume of capital projects, our volume. But the one area, and I know Rachel touched on it, the City Attorney Turpin touched on it a little bit in her presentation, is IT. So just a few years ago, an IT, say just a Microsoft license, wasn't considered a contract, but now it actually is. And so we have software for service contracts, and we have just a large amount, I think. And again, we can get back to you with the specific number, but it's several dozen each year that come up for renewal. So that's part of the volume is higher on some of those kind of small to middle end contracts that come up. And again, especially on the software for service side, that's really a growth area. And so this is one item that why the thresholds were what we set. And again, we had a lot of discussion internally on it, was specifically those contracts, because we're getting so many more than we have in the past.
Okay, so I think what I'm still either going to want more information on or trying to get a handle on is just the sense of what's the scope of decisions that fall, everything that falls above 350 was going to come to us anyway. So really what we're talking about is the difference between decisions, financial decisions between 100,000 and 350,000, and trying to get a sense of, is that 100 or 100,000 decisions that happen every year, to understand this relative scope of that. Okay, anyway.
We'll get back to you with that information.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Sorry, just had to go into question period. Continuing on with feedback, deliberation, any comments that anyone wants to bring up? Councilmember Hunt.
Under this page 10, where there's language about accepting, that designated people can accept materials, there's two conditions. So one is funds have been appropriated by the City Council in the biennial budget, and the contract does not require expenditures that exceed available fund balance. And the second one is the expenditure is consistent with the city's goals and policies. I think it would help me if it were clear that they're budgeted for the specific use that is intended, just to make it, that there's a project in or a line item in the biennial budget, which, as you said, it could be more general than that specific part of the project that is covered by the contract, but it should still be able to be tied back to something in the budget and support that. And then I thought it would be helpful for me if you could consider drafting language like that for the donations. So the donations right now, it says, I think, something a little bit softer about it being aligned with city policies, but I think it should still be used for a project that is something that the city is, that the council has approved, because otherwise I can imagine there could be lots of donations for something that is outside of the scope of the budget. So I thought, it may not be
Yes.
the exact same wording, but that similar idea
Question
could be helpful.
on that, just so I make sure I do I think that's actually an excellent idea, and I'd like that language to really match up in both those sections. Would you want that, though, for the general donations that can be used for any municipal purpose? If there's no restriction on the budget item or project or program, and you can just use it anywhere you want, would you still want to make sure that there was some relation to a particular program? In other words, would you still want to accept general donations where they, it's rare that we get something, honestly, that they say, you can use this for whatever you want, go plan your departmental party, but,
Well, I would still be in favor of accepting general donations. I think that those would probably be easy to tie
Right.
back to something that the city is already doing, because you would, but again, that would be helpful to have language in there that that's what that general donation would do.
Thank you.
Okay, now I have more questions. So if someone wanted to donate a park bench or money for, planting trees or anything like that, would adding a clarification that it has to be something that we have a specific budgeted around, if we don't have a specific budget for, say, donation park benches, would we be able to still accept the donation?
I believe that the way we've written it currently would allow us to accept that. Let me look at what do I.
Yeah, and I guess I'm more saying if we make a change to say that donations must be aligned with a budget item, my concern is we can't predict, maybe there is a natural disaster emergency that comes up and people want to donate for something that would address that. I don't want to put a barrier in place, and so I like the idea of alignment.
We have a bench donation policy.
Yes, I know,
Yeah.
and I was trying to pull out concepts of maybe somebody comes up with a really good idea for a donation that we would all be excited for, but if we don't already have a budget item, so.
The way it's currently worded, it would only allow administrative acceptance of donations for a specific project or program that the city's already doing. So if it was something for, an entirely new idea, we would have to come back to council for that. But if it was a donation to, I'm trying to think of it as something other than Green Issaquah, but, because we specifically tried to make it a little open with that thought in mind, because one, we've had Green Issaquah come up, so my original draft actually just had a specific section for Green Issaquah. We changed it to be program specific donations, because you're right, there may be other programs that people want to help with, but it wouldn't allow someone to basically create a new program for you, because that's your job, not theirs.
Got it. Okay. Councilmember DiMichele.
So just to get into the weeds on the park bench program, it is a program where there is no budget line item for it, because it's dependent completely on donations. And so it does raise a good question of, the wording there has to be really clear. If it's a program or project that we already support in terms of offering it to the public, I think that would be just fine. But in terms of that particular project does not have a line item budget, because it is entirely supported by donation. So shall we get even deeper into that, or should we just leave it there?
I left that
Rachel,
part alone.
Can you handle it?
Sure, I'll just create new program now.
Okay, Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. I was originally looking at other donation funded projects, which is on page 7. And there it also talks about prior to city council acceptance. So I wasn't totally clear on if that is for everything, but it also talks about these other projects on a case-by-case basis. So that was the one that I was thinking, like, I think it would be great to just make sure that everything is consistent. Everything should be tied to a city program that has been approved by us by the policymakers. So that was my thinking.
I agree. 3.7.3, I kind of left alone, but now looking at it, it needs to be worded differently to match. And in fact, we may be able to just strike it and incorporate some of that language into 3.7.2. It's confusing.
Deputy Council President Hall.
Two things then. Can we just make sure to call this out when this comes back to council again for adoption, just so we know exactly what the effect of any change this section would be? Okay.
Absolutely.
And then I also just wanted to plus one. I think Councilmember Ray said it perfectly around, we really do need to acknowledge that, in some sense, we are giving up some authority here. And so it just ensuring that there is diligence in what's happening on the back end there is important. I know there is because I know all of you, but I think it would be important to respond to that somehow when this comes.
On that, if I may really briefly, I'm a stickler about government transparency. It's one of my personal things I'm very concerned about. And I know that our city clerk is as well. And we would like to see all contracts available, publicly accessible. Like, that's something we are working towards in the future. We don't have any system right now, but it's something that's been on my radar from day one, because even the system we have now, I mean, it's easy for me to get a contract because I can just ask someone, but I think it'd be nice for the public to be able to look. And even the ones that have gone through council, you still have to search the meeting, find it, pull it out of a PDF. I mean, I think it would be great to have all that type of document easily publicly accessible. That's one of my goals.
So, okay, fantastic. Councilmember Ray.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a question or a comment. Maybe it's a question that morphs into a comment. But on page 10 of the red line document, it says, this delegation of authority to execute contracts shall include but not be limited to the following types of agreements. I'm having a scoping question because one of the things it talks about is settlement agreements. It talks about real estate leases and purchases. It talks about leases of city land. These are short-term leases of city facilities. Are those not bound by the dollar limits above, or are they? Because the way I'm reading it, they're not.
They would be bound by the dollar limits, and if there's not language right above, there should be I could probably clarify that by including that language basically in the paragraph above, because it means how I wanted it to read was, those are essentially a very exhaustive list of contracts, but that still they have to be within the thresholds. Funds have to have been appropriated in the biennial budget, and the contract can't require an expenditure beyond available funds.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of...
I left it like this because I thought there might be ones that you wanted to pull out and treat differently, so it was easier to kind of leave this exhaustive list, and then if there was something else, if you look at this and you say, oh, well, that's one that we want to keep, it was easier for me to be able to then pull it out. I wanted you to kind of see that, this is the kind of stuff I see every day.
I guess I'd like to also, this is more not a question or a comment, this is a suggestion. This is fairly detailed, this is fairly complex, and this is integral to everything we do. And this is a difficult forum for us to go through. And let's talk about line 7 on page 16, and should that be an if or a the? And that's the conversation, I think, quite honestly, I think we need to have. I mean, this is great, and you've done a lot of great work, but I think this is something where we need to be a little more involved in the wordsmithing of it, if you will. And we can do it here if you want to, but I don't know that this is the best forum for doing that. So I'm just wondering if we want to do an ad hoc committee, meet one time, walk through this with legal counsel and finance and whoever else from the administration, and go top to bottom of this thing and say, add this, take out that, and we agree with that, that's super cool. Just because I think we need to do that, because there's been too many things that have been talked about here that aren't clear to me that we're all on the same page, and then we're all going to kind of go bleh to you, and then you're going to try and figure out how to do that and bring it back, and it's, you know, it'll be a lot less work and a lot easier if we just get together and just hash it out.
Councilmember Mertz.
I'd like to say I really like that idea. I think of when Clerk Geezer led us on the, what was it, council rules and procedures, where we had a ad hoc committee that she worked us through over in the Hammond room, or whatever the room is over there by the mayor's office. You know, a series of questions that we're able to work through and then come back to the full council. And I feel that both got into a lot of good detail, but also allowed us to bring back a comprehensive recommendation. And I think that process might work really well here.
Okay, so I've heard 2 suggestions and some head nodding, all of that. I think I would be really interested in having a conversation about the number point, the 100,000 versus 350, as a larger group in a public forum. And so I'm wondering, how does everybody feel about the change to 350? Councilmember Hunt.
Sue, earlier this evening, you asked the question about how many decisions this makes that are between the thresholds that we're adjusting, and I think that's really important, because one of the main reasons we're doing this is to make it really clear and to streamline the process for that body of decisions. So I think, like, if there is some sort of natural break in there, then that would be good to have those numbers to see. If there's not, then we know that, and then we consider 350 and the 100.
Okay, so I think then, how does the body feel about potentially developing an ad hoc committee that would look over the line items and come back with a recommendation at the same time as we could get information from the administration about what types of decisions would fall in that gap, and how many there are, and then does that feel like a comfortable approach? Nods, nods, thumbs up. Wow, y'all are just so agreeable. Councilmember Hunt?
Yes, so I support all that, and good idea on the working through on an ad hoc. I had one more thing that I thought the ad hoc could consider, or staff could consider, which is, we do currently have cases, for instance, the trolley safety equipment, that was a $30,000 change to the mid-biennial budget. It was really important for the Issaquah History museums, but it's a small relative dollar amount, but it was still reported in a public forum, so it's easily searchable by those members of the public that are interested in that. And so I thought it might be helpful. You mentioned that there's some guidance for staff aside from this document as well, sort of supporting guidance. It might be helpful to have some guidance about topics that are very of high interest either to council or to the public, or something that we've tracked and we've discussed as a council that you could close the loop on, even if it's not exceeding the thresholds. So that we have that whole conversation in the public in an easily findable way, because as you said, it's currently not always easy to find these things. So I just thought that sort of guidance might be helpful. It's already something that staff does, but I don't know that there's formalized guidance about when and when not to bring back items that are below the threshold for for council's awareness.
I would be happy to share my 25-page manual with you. I'm really proud of it. I'm just glad that anyone wants to read it.
Oh, how is financial management this exciting? Okay. I was going to ask Clerk Geiser what the approach would be for setting up an ad hoc committee.
Technically, the council doesn't take action at the committee of the whole, so my recommendation is that we bring an agenda bill forward maybe even on the November 20th council meeting, basically with the current version and just of the financial policies and just tasking the ad hoc committee and the things that that agenda bill would need, so that could be helpful for a little bit of discussion, is a timeline for reporting back to the council. And then we'd need members. And so that could be discussed or determined at some time before that agenda bill comes back. And that's really it. The other thing in the council rules is if the council desires any particular visibility. So in the past with the council rules ad hoc, because it was a bit more of an internal to the city council, those meetings weren't televised and recorded. So if you have any guidance for the group regarding that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I'm just looking over the rules of procedure. Appointments may be made by a majority vote of city council or council president. So the other piece that would just be useful is for me to know is, do y'all want me to make a recommendation that would go into the agenda bill, or do we want to nominate people that night? I think we're pretty non-dramatic group, so if anybody wants to just send their interest on, as long as that's fine with people, I think we'll use that as a process. Okay, more thumbs up. Deputy Council President Hall.
Can we also just get a general response from the administration if you have any strong feelings about this proposal?
I think, hi, this is Andrea Snyder. I think an ad hoc committee sounds like a great idea. What that may mean is that we're just not going to make that December 4th anticipated timeline for approval. That's totally fine from the administration standpoint. So we want this to be a well thought out process, and for council to be able to make sure that the financial policies, that you're comfortable with those. So ad hoc committee process sounds great.
Would there be any other impacts that we might not anticipate other than Rachel getting asked the same questions again a couple more weeks?
But no major impacts. You know, it's going to take a little bit more time, maybe, but we have the time to put forward to this effort. So no anticipated negative impacts on this. Thank you.
Councilmember DiMichele.
If we have questions that we'd like to put in front of this ad hoc group, what's the process for submitting those? And I presume that we don't want to submit those until after the ad hoc has actually been approved on November 20th. So, but my question really is, if we've got, if I wanted to put a list of 5 questions that I would like to have addressed, when and how would I submit those?
As Clerk Geiser suggested, in order for us to do the agenda bill, one part of that agenda bill is what the task is for the ad hoc committee, so the things that they would be working on. So being able to make such comments tonight or provide them to the administration would be great for us to be able to discuss at that time when the agenda bill comes before council.
I'm happy to take any questions and comments, you know, by email that you have. I have a whole folder set up for this project, and I can put them in there so that I have them when we convene the ad hoc committee.
Guys, Rachel is way too excited about this.
Much too excited. It's a little embarrassing.
Yeah. You said it, I didn't. Okay. Do we feel like we've expressed everything we need to do? More thumbs up, head nods. Gosh, we're just so agreeable, even though we're asking for more time on something. But let's see, with that, we've already attempted to go through public comment. There was none. You've received council direction. So I think that item is closed. We've got good of the order. Anybody have anything? Councilmember DiMichele.
Hi, thanks. The Eastside Transportation Partnership, we had a meeting and refined the legislative priorities and submitted those to Metro, and those were distributed today. Too close to this meeting for me to get them out to you, but look tomorrow. I will send those to Wally or Andrea and have those distributed to you for commentary. And I believe the next ETP meeting is December 8th. So, and I'll confirm that when I send the email. But at any rate, we'll be distributing those to all of the councils of all of the members of ETP for commentary, and you should get your copy tomorrow.
Deputy Council President Hall.
Might as well just piggyback off that. So we now have the updated legislative agenda for Eastside Fire and Rescue. So we will also get that out to everyone so we can have a little good of the order discussion at our next council touch.
It is that season again. So with that, just a reminder, we've got the legislative breakfast coming up. Please make sure that's on your calendars. We've also got a holiday dinner, I think, November 28th, 29th, one of those two. Check your calendars. It should be there. And other than that, I think that's all for good of the order. So I will call this meeting adjourned at 8:57 p.m. Thanks.